Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul.
And my name's Marta. Welcome once again to the TangentCast here on RedGamingTech. How have you been?
Not too bad. Very busy as usual.
Well, that's not really anything new for us, is it? It's just kind of like a permanent state of being at this point.
Yeah, so basically like the PS4 Pro thing came out at
Yeah.
the same time as I'm trying to do like an SSD review and another review. So I was like,
Yeah, I had the fun of doing the Sony conference when I had to be up for work the next day, and that was fun.
Was it?
No.
No?
No.
It wasn't?
No.
The conference was pretty good though.
Well, it was very low key, but
I was surprised with the shortness, to be fair. I
was actually quite happy about the brevity, although I would have liked
brevity? The fucking intro was longer than the show.
Well, I would have liked some info about the PlayStation VR, or I was a bit surprised they didn't talk about that.
I honestly think they were going to, and then they decided not to, which is weird.
I don't know. So, let's talk about first the smaller of the two, the PlayStation 4 Slim.
It's slim, it's the old PS4. Can we move on?
Okay, well, no, I want to address something. Okay. Some people,
Right,
for some reason,
right.
were accusing people like myself and other people covering the PlayStation 4 Slim who'd actually, touched it, reviewed it, seen it work, that the whole thing was a fake and that the PlayStation 4 Slim wasn't real. Despite the numerous videos, photos and everything under the sun. Apparently it was all a big hoax. And oh look, it's real!
In all of its shitty glory. I think it looks horrible aesthetically, I have to say.
I don't mind it actually. I think it looks fine. I don't know why everyone's getting so bent out of shape about it. It looks fine.
It looks because it's fucking bent out of shape. It looks terrible.
It looks fine.
Like
it looks better than the Pro. The Pro looks like a fucking cake.
It's a lie. Yeah, honestly, it looks like people have gone at it with a sandpaper, and just kind of filed down the corners. I'm not saying Xbox One S is like beautiful, but Jesus.
Well, I think the Slim looks fine, and as we expected, it is a replacement for the current console, which means that there's absolutely no improvements other than a few aesthetic things. And
doesn't it have one port less as well? Like, I think
there's no optical out.
Yeah.
That's been taken off, and obviously the USB port's been moved around, and the eject and power buttons are now labelled and recessed.
I think the optical out is sucky for audio files.
Yeah, that a lot of people have been asking why that has been removed, but I don't have an answer for you. They did not talk about that, unfortunately.
Nothing to see here. It doesn't exist.
So, the PlayStation 4 Pro, probably the worst name in existence, but hey-ho.
I think even they can't quit PS4K because it doesn't have a HD, it doesn't have a Blu-ray.
Yeah,
4K,
I mean, it's not exactly the most inventive name, but I guess it works.
It's Pro.
Yeah, so it looks like a layer cake. That's the first thing that we saw.
That actually tells me as well why they were so upset because of the PS4 Slim leak, because it looks so aesthetically similar. It just looks like they've just double-decked the thing.
Yeah, I actually dislike the way the Pro looks and don't mind the way the Slim looks.
Do you want me to tell you a random little thing? I don't know
Sure.
if you saw I don't know if you've seen photos of the rear of the system.
No.
It's sexy ass.
No, I have not.
Well, you know how the PS4 has the standard 8 connector, like the figure 8 connector?
Yeah.
It's got like a kettle lead at the back, and the power supply is rated up to 300 watts. Which is really interesting, which tells me theoretically it could draw up to 300, I think it's 305 or 310 watts of energy, which is really weird because if you get like an i7 combined with like an RX 480, even that draws less power. So I want to know if that's operational energy or just the maximum.
It's probably not going to be using that all the time because that's crazy.
No, basically. But aside,
it's rated up to that, I guess.
Yeah.
So, the specs are what we all thought they were going to be.
Pretty
basically, 4.2 T-flops, and then apparently uses Polaris. Mark Sony said, although he did say, and many generations beyond. Which
a couple of generations. But you know what's really weird about that though, because it's a very ambiguous comment. And
yeah, so does that mean they're just going to keep? How can it use Polaris and beyond?
Well, basically, when GPUs are being created, right?
Yeah.
There's a large design process. It's like how when the PS4 GPU, if you look at it, it's got 8 asynchronous compute engines, and each of those can handle 8 queues each. That's 64 queues, right?
Right.
Which was in front of the PC GPUs at the time because they wanted to push, more. So what I wonder is if they've pushed additional geometry processing, or if they've pushed. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if it was something to do with tiling or scaling or something like that in the system, because they've said that there's some semi-custom hardware, which is how the GPU is handling the some of the geometry processing. And I believe, from what I heard, that some of it the developers don't have to put too much work into. But I'm not quite sure, and there's a lot of ambiguity there, because some developers are saying A and some developers are saying B. But Mark has said that he's going to go on record and say what some of the custom changes are on the GPU.
Yeah. And obviously improved processor and all that. And 1 terabyte hard drive, which is nice.
I don't think it's enough.
Well, it's better than 500.
Yeah, but, you know, to be honest, the only reason I'm not too upset about it is because you can change it.
I was going to say, you can put literally any hard drive you want in the PS4. And I would assume it's the case for the PlayStation 4 Pro.
I have a feeling that all of these changes, including the absence of the 4K Blu-ray, are pricing, because people have been absolutely destroying Sony because of the fact that they are actually the patent holder for the 4K Blu-ray,
and they don't even have it in the Pro. Yeah, that is a bit strange, because but you can stream Netflix at 4K if you want, but you can't put in a 4K Blu-ray.
I don't think it. Yes, the fact that they held the patent would obviously mean that they didn't have to pay the patent fee, but they would still need to buy the equivalent of components to put it in.
Well, obviously, it probably is a cost thing. To include that would probably means that the machine would not be as cheap as it is.
I mean, honestly, I reckon that there must have been some argument during the Sony offices that they wanted to have a 500GB model as well to make it even cheaper.
Probably, but
I think people would just destroy them.
Given that the Scorpio is probably going to have 1 terabyte as standard as well, that was probably not an option.
So there are a couple of things though that are still mysterious about the system.
Yeah.
The first of which, they didn't upgrade the memory, and there was no panicked increase of frequencies, like CPU, GPU, memory, but there were several developers asking for more RAM. So I do wonder if Sony have increased the allocation from the 512 megabytes additional to like 1 gig or 768 or whatever.
Remind me, the RAM has not increased.
No, the physical RAM on the system is still 8 gigs.
Right.
But basically, as you know, there's 8 gigabytes, and then it's divided between games and...
Or maybe they've allowed you to have a bit more flexibility there.
Well, what they did previously is they had 5 gigabytes and flexible memory.
Yeah.
And then they added an extra 512 if it's in Neo mode, because that's what the thing's called in development land.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, if you they added another 512 megabytes, but developers were still concerned because obviously when you've got large textures, that 512 megabytes doesn't get you very far. So what I wonder is if they've increased the allocation, or if we're going to see an update in the future which is further going to compress the OS, and they're going to increase the allocation further by another 512. And it's even weirder because, yes, the Scorpio ruffle stomps the PS4 Pro in terms of GPU power.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But the thing it really ruffle stomps it on is memory, because from what I've seen, if you look at the chips around the APU of the Xbox One Scorpio,
yeah,
we know the memory bus, the bandwidth, because they've already confirmed what that is. So the most logical way for them to do it would be to have, basically, if you just do all the maths, I went through it on my Scorpio analysis if you want to check it out, but the too long didn't read version is that it looks like you've got 12 gigabytes of memory on the Scorpio. And so even conservatively saying that they have the same memory allocation of the OS, which is going to be about 3.5 gigs. Even if let's just round it up and say 4 gigs, that means you've got 8 gigabytes to maybe 8.5 gigabytes conservatively for games, which is about 3 to 4 gigabytes more than the PS4 Pro, which is a lot.
Well, not only that, as we know from E3, obviously we don't know the exact specs for Scorpio as far as I understand. We only know vague terms.
Yeah.
But they did say at E3 that it's going to have 6 T-flops, I believe, of graphics power.
Yeah.
So it obviously already has basically 2 whole more T-flops of power there.
Now, I'm also going to put words in Microsoft's mouth, and I'm not an industry insider. I haven't had a coffee with Mark Cerny or Phil Spencer. But
unfortunately,
no,
Mark Cerny seems like an interesting guy.
You know what? I think Phil and Mark are really cool individuals. I'd love to just talk to them, even if it wasn't for...
about stuff. Just chat with them. Yeah,
Yeah.
Mark Cerny especially. Like, he was so soft spoken in the thing. He was just like, oh,
there were some individuals where when you speak to them, you feel that you're learning, and I feel that no matter if you're a Sony fan, whether you're a Microsoft fan, or you don't care about console loyalty, even Iwata, for example, from Nintendo, or Miyamoto, there are some individuals where you speak to them and their passion is like really obvious.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not just like I want to know about your technology. I think some individual like John Carmack,
He's a flat out genius from what he did back in the days of like Doom 1 and 2. He's
exactly
literally a genius. I'd love to just chat with him about technology and have half of what he says go straight over my head, but it'd still be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, it's like, I love to speak to people, especially about things that I don't know about.
Yeah, because then it just inspires you when you know someone who's just like an expert in their field, even if it's a field you don't actually know much about. But you might be inspired to learn more by talking to them.
Precisely. But anyway...
Yeah, we kind of went off a bit of a tangent there.
But one thing I find really interesting is if you do the math of the Scorpio...
Yes.
Right? The Polaris, the RX480 to clarify, has 36 compute units. Basically, 64 shaders per CU.
Yeah.
So if you do the math, that's 2,304.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you times that by 2...
Yeah.
And then you times it by the clock speed of the PS4 Pro, that tells me that it's using an RX 480 derivative on the RX. It's about 911 megahertz, which puts you at about 4.2 T-flops. To get that for the Scorpio to the 6, it would mean the clock speed's going to have to be about 1300 megahertz, which ain't going to happen for a console. It's way too high. It would just nuke the yields, which tells me more likely we're seeing a version of Vega.
Maybe, yeah.
Now, Vega, it could be Vega or it could be a variant of Navi. So, what's interesting to me is that presumably, if it's 1 or 2 generations above with the PS4 Pro, that means in theory, obviously I don't know this because we've not even heard Mark Cerny, but it could have some of the advanced features of Vega, right?
Yeah.
But the Scorpio, if it's a year later, it's almost certainly going to have Vega-orientated features.
Probably, yeah. I mean, that might be why they decided to wait until holiday 2017, so they could have Vega.
Now, I know it's not going to have HBM.
No.
But what's really interesting is, in a theoretical world, we could see it having some features of Navi in the Scorpio. Now, I'm not saying it will.
It's possible because we know very little about the actual specs of the Scorpio, other than the fact that it's got 60 flops.
One area, however, that a lot of folks are forgetting because they're doing apples to apples comparisons, they're saying, well, and to be fair, it's very easy to do this, and I was a little bit guilty of it in a couple of my videos because obviously we didn't know it was using Polaris. But in my recent PS4 video, I pointed out or PS4 Pro video, that with Polaris, yes, if you do an apples to apples comparison of like this amount of this amount of T-flops versus this amount of T-flops, the PS4 Pro is about 2.28 times faster than the PS4, right? The vanilla PS4. But with Polaris, it's not like that because you've also got much improved memory compression, bandwidth compression. You've got improvements to geometry. You've got improvements to compute. And you've got improvements to the caching system and various other bits and pieces. I did a Polaris analysis if anyone's interested in watching it. So basically, although in raw T-flops, the PS4 Pro is about 2.28, there are a lot of intangible benefits of just the Polaris architecture as a whole. So I do wonder if or what we're going to see, especially as developers get more used to it and the tool chains become more advanced.
Yeah, I mean... Another thing that we forgot to mention, which is kind of nice, is that even the vanilla PS4 in a new firmware update, which we don't know the release date of yet, is going to support.
Next week.
Yeah, I said the exact release date. I mean,
sorry.
Yeah. It's gonna, all PS4s are going to support HDR, which is quite nice. I thought that was quite a nice little sort of tip of the hat to even like vanilla PS4 people, and obviously people with the Slim as well, since there's literally no difference. Someone was asking me, if I get the Slim, will it have HDR via firmware? And I said, well, yeah, because there's literally no difference between the hardware of the Slim and the
Well,
normal.
it's using Polaris.
No, the Slim.
Yeah,
Slim.
it's using Polaris.
What do you mean?
It's using Polaris. It's using 14nm for Slim, as far as I'm aware.
Oh, so there is a difference then.
Yeah, but it's still going to use HDR. It's not a problem.
Right. Okay.
With the thing about the original PS4, there's a couple of little points. The thing about the original PS4 is I'm very curious how they managed to get HDMI, because as far as we know, the Xbox One and the original PS4, obviously both released in the same time window, 2013, and as far as we're aware, they're HDMI 1.4 specs. So there is a lot of questions as how Sony have managed to get HDR on 1.4 HDMI port because of the amount of bandwidth. As far as I can see, I think it's Dolby Logic HDMI, HDR, but basically that's the only way I can see of getting it working. So it's a bit weird. And the other issue, and this is more to do with the PS4 Pro, from what I'm reading, and from what developers have been saying, whispers, the PS4 Pro has one issue, and that is the CPU. So what you get often is that you can bump the resolution up or you can increase the texture quality, but the CPU physically can't keep up with the GPU sometimes, so that's why you're getting frame rate dips quite often.
Right. Well, I mean, obviously, it's going to all come down to the real world testing, and obviously we will be doing that on the release of the Pro, in theory. And obviously that kind of ties into another piece of news on our list today, which is regarding Rise of the Tomb Raider. Obviously a few other games have done this, but Rise was the first one that I saw having revealed this, that the PS4 Pro version of this game is going to allow you to choose between various resolution and frame rate options. So basically, this is remembering off the top of my head, you're going to have 3 settings to choose from. One is basically 4K mode, and that's going to be capped at 30 FPS, and then 1080 capped at 30, but then you've got high frame rate mode, which is still 1080 I believe,
but has lower quality.
But it will unlock the frame rate, and Crystal Dynamics did say that, look, sometimes it is not going to hit 60, but on average it should be around 45 frames per second, which is still better than just having it locked at 30. And the reason I wanted to bring focus to this, not only in a video that I've already done when it was revealed, but now again, is because I have been saying that console games should have these sorts of options for gamers for ages.
You know what?
Some people just would prefer to. I don't care if it's 720p if I can play it at 60. Like, for example, Bloodborne. If From Software went and patched Bloodborne so that you could play it at 60 FPS but have slightly worse graphics, would you not jump at that option? I know I would. That would improve that game so much. That's the main reason I want it on PC, so it can have a proper frame rate.
You know, it's kind of funny as well, because the same thing is with Last of Us. You remember The Last of Us Remastered?
Yeah, it's at 60 on PS4, which is so much better.
But there is a 30 FPS mode. And the 30 FPS mode improves the quality of textures, shadows, and there's something else it improves. I think it might be anti-aliasing. I did do an analysis of it. I can't remember off the top of my head. But anyway, and basically they're doing the same for this.
Yeah.
So what's quite funny though is that it looks like essentially you're gonna have to make a decision, because from what I'm hearing, when it goes to 4K mode, the graphical fidelity in terms of like the improvements to textures and so on isn't quite as good as like a 1080p. So for some folks, it might still be better to run the game at 1080p for some games. Yeah,
but it's giving more choice to people, and you know, it might actually make the Pro a bit more enticing, I guess, for PC gamers as well. Because look, no, listen, please listen. You don't only let me finish my point.
Alright.
They're obviously not going to play a game that's on PC on PS4 Pro, obviously.
They might laugh at it.
But let's say you have a PS4 exclusive, like Bloodborne, just for example. It might make it a bit more palatable because you can play it at 60 or unlocked frame rate, so at least is not stuck at 30, maybe it goes up to 50 even, just for example. Even if it doesn't hit 60 all the time, it's still going to be better. Like, some people refuse to play PS4 exclusives that are locked at 30 because they just can't deal with the low frame rate. So if you just say, look, you have the option of playing it at a higher frame rate, worse textures or worse resolution, it might make it a bit more palatable for PC gamers, but you're not going to get people who've got a 1080 to play a game that's also on PC on the PS4 Pro.
Yeah, it's like Sony are like, oh, it's going to entice PC gamers over. No, it's not.
Yeah, like this kind of ties into another thing. Yes, a lot of Sony stuff this week, but it's hardly surprising. Some comments that Andrew House made and into The Guardian, where basically he talked about a few things, but one of the things he did say is that apparently when they were making the PS4 Pro, the Xbox was not even in their minds. I mean, I don't believe that for a second, but that's what he said. But I don't believe it. What they were thinking about, however, was the PC, and I'm like, okay, I can see that for certain situations, like the situation I just described with Bloodborne or some other game that is much improved with a higher frame rate. Like most games, to be honest.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Unless it's like South Park Stick of Truth, frame rate does matter. Anyway, unless you've got a case like that, you're not going to get someone with a 1080 to be like, golly gee, a whole 4.2 T-flops.
The other problem with that is that you don't need a particularly good GPU. Like, you could have even a heavily overclocked 2600K, you could have like a FX 8350, you could have like and most of these CPUs you can buy really dirt cheap on eBay now.
Yeah.
And for $350 you can buy like a GTX 1070, you can buy an RX 480 and still get better graphics than the PS4
that's what
Pro.
I'm saying. So it is quite funny how Sony are like, yeah, we're trying to target PCs, and I'm like, why? You're not going to get a PC gamer with a good setup to come over to
and
the
it's
Pro.
so cheap to buy it.
Yeah, like
especially if you might get some sales.
Yeah, you might get someone who has a low end system who can't afford to upgrade, and somehow the Pro is cheaper in some.
You'd have to have a really shitty.
Yeah,
system.
You'd have to have like a system from like 10 years ago or something like that for this to apply. But let's just say this person exists somewhere, which they probably do. But let's say they do. That person might be enticed to the Pro because it is cheaper and easier as well. They just have to go to the shop, buy the Pro, done.
The problem, though...
But you're not going to get someone with a 480, 1070, or even like a 980 to come over to the Pro on the basis of like, yeah, we're better now. It's like, okay, and I'm still beating you with my setup. Yeah,
because let's say you've got a decent hard drive, like let's say you've got a couple of 1 terabyte hard drives, you've got a decent power supply, you've got a decent case, you could go on eBay, you can buy like an i5, you could buy an FX 8350, you can go ahead and buy like the R9 290s, the 290Xs, you could buy like RX 480, they're so cheap, you could buy a very, very powerful setup, or you could just go and buy a GTX 1070, which ruffle stomps a PS4.
Yeah, that's what
and the other issue as well is if you've not invested into Sony's console generation, like let's say you're an Xbox owner currently, the problem is, and this is the only negative I have against the PS4 Pro, if you invested in the Xbox currently, if the first party generation games of Sony, so once again the Naughty Dog games and whatever, hasn't convinced you yet,
they're not going to just because this one has more power.
No, because you can either say to yourself, fuck it, I'm just going to buy an upgraded PC.
Yeah.
Or, you might say Scorpio. And the problem also is that November is like death month. October, November, and even early next year are death months. You've got so many games coming out.
I mean, especially considering as well that you've got the PSVR coming out October the 13th, I think.
Something like that, yeah.
Something along those lines. It's a very expensive period, which is also going to come into people's minds. And, I would imagine that a lot of people are going to get the PS4 Pro under their Christmas tree.
Basically. I think, the PS4 Pro is great if you've been wanting to buy a PS4, but you just haven't done it yet because you've been waiting for Christmas and you want it to get like a good couple of games under your belt.
I have no doubt in my mind that the Pro is going to sell, probably quite well. But they are making, in my mind, a massive mistake by trying to take on PCs because they're going to lose. They are going to lose. Someone who has a good setup is not going to buy the Pro. So I do have to question the validity of Sony's strategy here, because not only is the Scorpio better than the Pro, a high-end PC smacks the Pro around like a bitch.
Another problem with the PS4 Pro, and we'll get into it in a second, is the NX, which is released in March.
Well, they've said they're not targeting power, so I don't think they're worried about that.
Yeah, but that's not the point. If you've already got a PS4 and you've got limited funds...
Right, I see what you're saying.
It's like, here's how my mind would work if I've got limited funds. I'd be like, okay, I could get better looking games on my PS4, but especially if you don't have a 4K television.
Yeah.
Right, okay, you can get better graphics on a 1080p screen. Absolutely, I agree. You can get higher frame rates. Absolutely agree. But for a lot of folks, they've been waiting for the NX for ages. So yes, the NX could turn out to be a piece of shit, or it could turn out to be a revolutionary, awesome system. Like, it could be like the new N64. Like the N64, when the N64 was first released, although I didn't manage to buy one, because I just couldn't afford it with the Saturn and the bloody PlayStation and PC at the time. Like, the N64 just rocked. It had Mario 64, soon after it had Zelda, it had GoldenEye. I mean, the N64 just was amazing. And look at the SNES when it was launched.
Yeah, yeah.
So, even the GameCube. So, I'm just saying, for a lot of folks, if you've got finite funds, spending $350, or that's pounds, $400 on a PS4 Pro, possibly spending X amount on all the games that's coming up. God help you if you've got an Xbox as well, and a PC.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be an expensive time. I mean, should we talk about the NX, or do you want to talk about Fallout since it's kind of PS4 related?
I'll let you lead.
Well, let's just finish up all the PS4 stuff in one go. As we all know, people on Xbox have been enjoying mods for a while.
As someone on Microsoft was quite happy to remind us.
Yeah, Major Nelson was quite funny. We'll get to that later.
Yeah.
And obviously PC users have been enjoying them since launch. And obviously the mods were supposed to come to PS4 as well, and it looks like that's not happening anytime soon. And I'm not really sure whose fault it is. But
Sony is saying something like they don't want to accept user mods or something like that.
Well, I haven't seen any statement from Sony, but Bethesda are basically saying that Sony are not allowing mods to work the way they should work. And I'm like, okay, I don't know who's being unreasonable here because we don't have all the information. Are Sony being unreasonable or are Bethesda being unreasonable?
It's going to be hurting their relationship, though.
Yeah, I mean,
because that was one of the selling points,
yeah.
wasn't it?
I mean, Bethesda have been touting, yeah, you can get mods on console for that and Doom, obviously, for a while, and they're not coming to Fallout 4 anytime soon until this disagreement between Bethesda and Sony is sorted out. They're not coming to PS4. Now, my question is, again, who's being unreasonable? Some people have said that it's because Sony's asking for quality control of the mods. They want someone at Bethesda to make sure that, you know, you can't just see this woman's tits or whatever in this mod. You know,
What's wrong with tits?
Nothing. I'm just saying Sony might not want that on their console. I mean, I'm just theorising of the
Come
sort
on,
of
Microsoft,
content.
you've got the tit demographic here.
Yeah, you got the tit demographic.
Great demographic, to be fair.
Yeah, and you know, someone was saying that's what they're asking for, and Bethesda don't want to do it because, well, they don't have the manpower. And I'm like, okay, if that's the case, then you can kind of see Sony's side of it. But if that's not the case, and they don't want to have user created content, or the mod size is too small, that's another thing I saw that it's possible that the mod size limitation is kind of meaning that most mods won't work. Is it just that, you know, they don't want to open their console up like that? You know, we just don't know, but people aren't really happy about it, and I don't really blame them.
You know, oh, actually, I forgot to mention.
Yes.
You know how Microsoft have started to allow developers or people to develop games and applications and stuff for the Xbox and all of that. I can't remember what it is. It's some emulator. I think it's for the NES. And apparently the rumours are it's past certification, so it might actually appear on the Xbox store.
Interesting.
Now, I don't know,
I would be very surprised if Nintendo allow that.
Well, they can't not allow it. That's the
Why?
thing. Well, technically they could pressure Microsoft, but an emulator, if it doesn't contain a BIOS of the original console, I believe a judge ruled it as it's fine.
But doesn't it need the BIOS to function on
No,
most
you
cases?
can emulate it in many cases. That's like if you download, I don't know, like Gens or I don't know, Dolphin. I believe not all, but some emulators do work without BIOSes, and in those cases, I believe that there was a judgment that you can't make them prohibited because, and it's like I think it was. Don't quote me on this, because I can't remember the exact case, but you know Dreamcast?
No.
Basically, back in the day of the Dreamcast, there was a disc that you could put in your Dreamcast that would allow certain games of PlayStation 1 games to run on the Dreamcast, right? And Sony tried to sue the guys behind it,
right?
But because it wasn't using a PlayStation BIOS, and it wasn't using the PlayStation architecture, it was just emulating the functions via software, The company eventually shut down because of legal fees,
Right.
but the judge ruled in their favour. And how
So there's a precedent for this to be actually allowed.
And how they actually really killed them wasn't even the legal fees. They strangled them out of the marketplace by basically Sony being bitches, and they were threatening the shops. They basically said to like major chains who were selling the Dreamcast, if you sell this product, we will not give you shipments of PlayStation or PlayStation 1 titles for Christmas. They physically threatened them. And obviously shops were like, well, we can either sell this one product or we cannot have PlayStation.
Yeah, obviously they're going to go for PlayStation.
And Nintendo have used similar bully tactics before.
Yeah.
But the reality is, I don't know, Microsoft might cave or might remove it if they realise what's going on, simply because it's could cause some bad PR or bad blood. But they also might not, because one of the things they've said is that it's freedom to create your own application. So it's going to be interesting, because this emulator is going to be a precedent.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between creating your own applications and creating an application that runs your competitors' games.
Well, it's not really competitive, it's NES, but I get your point.
Yeah, but they still belong to Nintendo, who is a competitor.
True, but it's also it's kind of a tricky situation. There might have been an update.
You can't even argue that these games are abandonware, because a lot of them are available on the digital storefront for Nintendo.
Well, if it's on the Wii U, it is basically abandoned.
Oh dear.
Anyway, the savage quote for this.
Yeah. On that note, let's talk about the tweet from.
Well, maybe we're not finished with the savage quote.
Major Nelson. What was it? He said, he just tweeted about the Fallout 4 thing, saying, yeah, Xbox One users have been enjoying mods since May the 31st.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh.
And it's quite funny as well, because then the official Xbox account has been doing trolling, like at Sony. Yeah, you can play 4K Blu-ray on the Xbox One.
Yeah, like it had like a list of ticks for the Xbox One S, like 4K video and HDR and all this other stuff. And it's like, and a faster, more reliable network.
Yeah, it's like, oh god.
Oh. Anyway, speaking of Nintendo, do you want to give us the lowdown on the NX?
Well, I don't know much about it. All I know is that some analysts have been quoted as saying that next month is the month that they're going to reveal the NX. And really, I don't see any other time they can do it. It's like,
well, if they don't do it next month, then they're going to get buried in the avalanche of game releases, because people are going to be getting hyped about all the big games that are coming out.
They can't do it in January because
that's way too soon. I mean, to be honest, I think Sony cut it a bit fine when really unveiling the Pro like 2 months before release. So they do have time, but I would say it's smart to unveil it in October, just before the huge avalanche of releases in November. Because there is a couple of games coming out at the end of October, but most of them are in November because developers hate us.
Speaking of Bethesda,
yes,
did you hear the quote? I'm pretty sure it was Bethesda, that they will not support the NX unless it's as powerful or more than the Xbox One.
No, I didn't see that.
I'm pretty sure it was Bethesda.
Anybody.
I'm pretty sure it was Bethesda. They said something along the lines of that we will not support the NX if it is not as powerful as the Xbox One.
Okay.
Just so that I'm clear. Yeah, I just did a bit of Googling to make sure I'm not talking out my ass. And apparently it was an interview with the Metro UK. Peter Hines talked about how Bethesda hasn't supported Nintendo hardware for ages, pretty much. And it's like, well, we can make it work, but we'd have to cut this or cut that. But no, that's not the point. The point is to take the game as you designed it and get it working on those platforms, not make a bunch of cuts or any other versions. So basically they're saying that it has to be powerful enough for them to run it, and they don't want to make a whole bunch of cuts for them to put the games on the system.
I think most developers and publishers are thinking something similar, because obviously a lot of the big names did not support the Wii U because it was just way too much work to port to that system, because of the power and the extra screen. And obviously that was one of the many things that signed the death warrant for the Wii U. So I think not only are fans eagerly watching what Nintendo are doing, but
so is Ceiling Cat.
So yeah, Ceiling Cat is watching, and so are developers and publishers. And how powerful the machine is definitely going to decide whether or not they get third-party support. So, and obviously, while you're not really buying a Nintendo console for third-party games, it is a nice bonus to know that, hey, I can also play, I don't know, Dishonored 2 or whatever on this machine.
Well, you say that, but if you've got a PS4, or you've got a Xbox One, you might at least want the option of buying them.
Yeah,
on
yeah.
the
I
NX.
mean,
especially if it's supposed to be a portable system as well.
Yeah, it's weird. We don't know what the NX is, so it's really hard to speculate. If it's,
I mean,
if it's portable, then obviously it's just going to be Nintendo. Obviously,
I mean, for all we know, it's going to be a bloody masturbation device. It's like it's like seriously. I mean, especially with it saying it's got all these plastic attachments that operate and vibrate. It's like I'm like, what is one for his and one for her? It's like Jesus, or one for both.
Alright, so shall we wrap things up with your stuff on Bristol Ridge?
Sure. So, as you're possibly aware, AMD have been pushing APUs. And as you're probably aware, Zen is going to be in the future, not this year.
Yeah.
So basically, Bristol Ridge is going to be an amalgamation of their current CPU architectures combined with Polaris and on a DDR4 platform. And obviously, they're pushing it against the Intel competitors of roughly the same price point and saying it performs better if it's computer-orientated tasks, graphic-orientated gaming, that type of thing, which isn't really surprising. The fact it's got DDR4 support also means that memory bandwidth is less of an issue compared to the older APUs, which is one of the reasons they weren't able to put in a bunch of compute units.
Right.
Because basically the DDR3 memory just couldn't keep up with it.
Mm.
But the main reason a lot of folks are interested in this, although they've also got a lot of support supposedly with their partners with APUs, which is quite nice. But the big benefit is that you're going to be able to take that same platform and then put in a Zen CPU like 6 months from now or whenever it's released.
Yeah.
So they're selling pretty well from what I'm hearing, or a lot of OEMs are interested in them.
Okay.
Because you've got a lot of performance for a decent price.
Mm.
Now, obviously, if you've got something like a 6700K or a 5930 or whatever, you're not going to want to put this in your machine.
Yeah.
But for folks who are just looking for like a light gaming system or something to, let's say, put in your living room and eventually you can upgrade that to Zen, it's a very nice little option, and I think they've done a pretty good job with it.
Cool.
And obviously it supports all the latest USB standards and
obviously.
SATA and all of that.
Yeah.
I don't think I really need to
say
that, but
I would hope not.
No, but it's got all the latest shiny stuff and supports like ridiculously fast DDR4 memory, and it's a nice little processor.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Alright, since we kind of mentioned it earlier with the tweets from Xbox, I should feel like, I'll quickly mention this. If you want the full details, there is a video I did a couple of days ago on it. But basically, there was a study done by IHS Markit, I believe it was, who studied various aspects about the PlayStation Network and Xbox Live networks, I guess. And they found that the Xbox Live system is faster and more reliable than the PlayStation Network. And basically the only real sort of even ground between the two was matchmaking, and Xbox Live beat PSN on pretty much every other count of login speed and server reliability and that sort of thing.
Well,
but the thing is, like, I kind of question the login speed thing, because the reason PSN lost out there is because it's a two-step login process. However, I would say, okay, it's a slower login, but it's more secure. I kind of prefer more security, especially with PSN's history.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, to be honest, PSN automatically loses when you forget to tell your users for several days, by the way, your credit cards have been stolen.
Yeah, there is that. But so even ignoring that, I mean, I would say that two-step login is arguably better for security, but they weren't looking at security, they were looking at speed,
it doesn't matter about hacking.
How quickly can you get it together with a group of friends, how is the matchmaking, how often are you kicked from the games, that sort of thing. And Xbox Live,
if they were using Street Fighter 5 as one of the PS4 examples, the PS5 examples, that would probably explain everything.
Yeah, so that's why Xbox Live, the Xbox Twitter was also tweeting about that in a kind of like lol moment, moment to Sony there.
It's weird because I was saying this in another
I find it
video.
quite funny that they've kind of had like a peaceful respect nodding to each other for the last few months.
And now it's like,
with Sony ruffle stomping them, and now all of a sudden that they have something to kind of be
Buy it
celebrating about. All of a sudden it's like, no, troll mode activate. And I'm like, oh, so you were peaceful and you got nothing to boast about. The second you got something to boast about, with Sony actually having been quite reasonable, and not apart from the whole video of the how you trade games thing. Now all of a sudden it's like, yes, our time has come.
I think it's quite funny though, because if I were Microsoft, actually, I think they're quite vindicated to be.
No, to be honest, like I don't blame them.
You know
it's
why?
Just funny.
Because when every one of their marketing adverts, and you notice it's no longer doing it, they were like the fastest, most powerful console, supercharged PC architecture, the most powerful console, the most powerful console, the most powerful console. Now, for some reason,
they're not doing that anymore.
Yeah, for some reason, since Microsoft was like, oh, by the way, this little thing over here.
Yeah, I feel like they probably are getting back at them for that little E3 video of here's how you trade games, and then you got the passing the discs to the other person.
So it's like, you notice the wording when they was like, this will be the most powerful console, released. But they were very careful with the wording because they knew that the Scorpio was just going to ruffle stomp them, and basically whatever they said, Microsoft would give them it back like 500 times over. The only thing I will say about Sony is that the price of the PS4 Pro, no matter what you want to say about the Blu-ray, the price of it I think is really good, and I would argue it's so cheap that it's almost not worth buying a regular PS4.
No.
And B, if the Scorpio, because all I think it was Phil would say is that they were going to put it at a price which was made sense for gamers. Well,
yeah, we don't know how much the Scorpio is going to cost. I mean, it's probably going to be more expensive than the Pro because it's more powerful than the Pro, but we just don't know.
Then again, technology does get cheaper.
Yeah, we have no idea. It could be 4p or it could be 400p. We just don't know.
If it's 400p, that's still only £4. It's pretty cheap.
Yeah. I'm just saying, we literally have no clue.
You didn't think that one through,
no,
did you?
I did. I'm just saying, that's how little we know. We literally have no idea how much it's going to cost.
Hear that? Well, there you go. Amata reckons it's going to be between
No, that's
4p
not what I
and
said.
like about 400p.
That's not what I said.
So there you go. It's a bargain.
That's not what I said.
Yeah.
That's not what I said.
You did.
No, I didn't.
Rewind and point out the time code, viewers.
I know what I said, but that's not what I meant.
It doesn't matter what you meant.
It does matter what I meant. It's probably going to be about $400. 450 maybe.
450.
Yes,
350.
exactly. Anyway, on that note, because I'm frankly dying of heat right now, we should wrap up the video. So thank you very much for listening, guys. As always, do hit us up with any questions and comments, and we'll see you next week.
Pretty much.
Bye.
Bye. Don't know what that was about.
Me neither.
No.
Bye.
Bye.